Hello, it's Tuesday, January 24th, 2017.
Today in the news, we'll be talking about the fentanyl crisis in BC and Alberta.
The Conservative leadership race.
As well as Donald J. Trump.
I'm Bandwanger.
And I'm the Dino Man.
And this is
the Broke Canadian Newscast. There are two guys with more time than money to spare, discussing local to world affairs. There's Bandrainer first with the Dino Man last. Here's the Broke Canadian Newscast.
So how have you been this week?
It's been a good week. I went out on Sunday with some friends and had a very philosophical birthday party and a very party-esque birthday party.
What kind of things did you talk about at your philosophical birthday party?
Well, things we're going to be talking about today, that's for sure. I'll let you guess which one.
I'm the fentanyl crisis.
Yeah, no.
The Conservative leadership party race.
Nope.
The other one.
The other one. The news that doesn't matter. There was a little bit of that. No, it was Donald J. Trump. Although we did talk about, like, Marxist ideas and whatnot. And all sorts of stuff.
Okay. I've been alright. I mean, didn't work all that much this week, which is fine by me. I still get paid. I don't know. Just hung out. Watched, have you watched any of the new Netflix show, Lemony Snicket, the series of unfortunate events?
No, I have not.
It's pretty good. Neil Patrick Harris plays, the Count Olaf bad guy. And, Patrick Warburton.
Warburton!
Yeah!
Oh, I love Patrick Warburton.
He plays he basically is the narrator.
Oh, he's amazing. I love this.
So, Lemony Snicket, if you don't know, is actually both the pen name of the author and also kind of a character in the books. Yeah. He's the guy who's bringing you this story, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I think it was the same way.
So Patrick Warburton is Lemony Snicket?
Is Lemony Snicket, and he just bursts in every once in a while, busts the fourth wall, and says things like, I'm sorry to inform you that this alleged entertainment you're about to watch is very unpleasant. It's just all that kind of stuff.
I remember another movie we watched together where a certain actor broke the fourth wall at multiple points, including having like a long and drawn out speech.
Are you talking about JCVD?
JCVD!
Oh boy, that's a good movie. I want to see that again.
That's a great movie, yeah.
It's a great movie. Well, I think that's enough messing around. You want to get into it?
Alright, let's cut to the local news.
So our first story today is going to be the fentanyl crisis, specifically in BC and Alberta, although this is starting to spread throughout the country.
Yeah, we've got cases of popping up in Toronto, and I'm sure it's going to be hitting the East Coast within 6 months.
Let's just start by getting some figures to get the scope of the problem in BC and Alberta.
Sure.
You want to bring those up? So, during 2016, specifically the first 10 months, because we don't have all the data, in BC there were 622 overdoses. Of that, about 330 were linked to fentanyl. In Alberta, 340 approximately. Again, these are numbers up to the end of October. And 190 about of them were linked to fentanyl. Mm-hmm. So this has been a big problem. There's been more and more drug deaths over the past year, and more of them have been linked to fentanyl.
In both these places, we're looking at over 50% being due to fentanyl, although population of BC and Alberta are about the same, so it's definitely disproportionately affecting BC.
Yes, no, for sure. Vancouver has, certain areas of Vancouver has always had drug problems.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And recently, with fentanyl getting into the drug market, the number of overdose deaths have increased.
Plus, when we're talking about how fentanyl's getting here, Vancouver's kind of a port city and a...
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about why this is happening. Back before the mid-1990s, opioid analgesics, morphine, and derivatives, those are all chemically related. If you're addicted to one, you can take any of the others, they'll hit the same receptors, they'll satiate your addiction. Were not prescribed very often. They're only prescribed in acute pain, and they were, in fact, I would hazard to say they were underprescribed.
Oh, yeah.
My mother works in healthcare, and she tells stories of people dying of cancer, and then people being very, very reluctant to prescribe any sort of pain relief because it's an addictive level of morphine, and you can't prescribe that much morphine because they're going to get addicted. Even in cases where, frankly,
they're in hospice care.
They're going to die soon. It's not going to be a problem for them. And in fact, it will alleviate their suffering for sure. Yes. And so that was in the 1980s, that was kind of the environment around opioids use. Now, when we start getting into the 1990s, due in large part due to marketing both directly to in the States, because you can't market drugs directly to customers.
But you get their television.
Yeah, exactly. So directly in the States and to prescribers, to doctors, there was a big push to use opioids for chronic conditions, chronic pain. In some cases, this might very well have been appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
But it did lead to this increase in prescribing led to a lot of problems. People got addicted to opioids that they were prescribed, and then once they no longer got those prescriptions, they started going to the streets. And most commonly, that meant that they were getting heroin.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
been the street opioid for Lord knows how long.
Now, oxycodone was also a big street drug for a long time.
Yeah.
Another derivative of morphine.
Mm-hmm.
But recently, the supply of oxycodone has gone entirely to controlled release formulations that are much harder to get in street use formulations.
Now, I was just saying that most of the Oxycontin that you found on the streets, this was all done through actual legitimate production facilities and not produced in people.
The oxycodone was mostly legitimate stuff, and then it got siphoned to the streets.
Okay.
Again...
Hence why the drug changes actually affects the street drug itself.
Yeah, exactly. But recently, again, oxycodone formulations have switched pretty much entirely to controlled release, which you cannot crush up and inject. You can't. It's not getting the initial burst of high. It's better in that it isn't as prone to abuse, but one could argue it did lead to this most recent problem. Now, fentanyl is another opioid that is much more potent than even morphine and even heroin.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the high demand for heroin, drug dealers are starting to maximize their supply by cutting it with fentanyl. You only need a tiny amount, grain of salt amount, to increase the effect of heroin greatly.
Now, how much more powerful is fentanyl from morphine, approximately?
Fentanyl is about 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine.
Okay.
It's used in a lot of surgical usages.
And they dilute it with some other salines.
Yeah, for sure. And if you've ever heard of painkiller lollipops, that is fentanyl.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the painkiller lollipops, that is fentanyl. So it's a very potent, powerful drug. And the other thing is, it's very easy to make. I have a background in organic chemistry, and I looked up the synthesis of fentanyl, and possibly got you onto a government watch list, so you're welcome.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm probably on there from other things.
And the synthesis of fentanyl is pretty simple, using pretty simple ingredients. It doesn't require a lot of expertise, especially if you're doing it not to be pharmaceutically pure, but street pure, let's just say.
Yeah, you're not getting graded on this.
No. So it's simple synthesis. It's a fairly easy drug to make. A lot of it's being made in China and being sent over. That's why you're seeing it a lot in Vancouver because of that.
Yeah, and we were looking this up, and one of the common, I guess you could say, methods of smuggling it is actually in those little silica packets.
Yeah.
Which is I never thought of, but it's a genius idea because you never open those.
Yeah, and then you put some sort of marking on it to signify these are the ones the drug is in. So you get fentanyl and you put just a smidge of it in the heroin. Mm-hmm. It makes it more potent for less amount. The problem with that is that because fentanyl is more potent than heroin, the drug user is going to take the same amount of dose.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know what they're getting. So you have this fentanyl cut with a little bit of, this heroin cut with a little bit of fentanyl.
Yep.
You have people injecting the same amount as before, and then they die of an overdose. What happens is that your respiratory system just shuts down.
And I mean, it's the same problem you have with people who used to take a certain amount of drug, then they go into rehab for a year, few years, and then they relapse due to some circumstance, and they decide to take the same amount of drug that they could handle right before rehab, and their body is just not ready for that, and same stuff happens.
Now, what's even scarier is that we're starting to see traces of a related compound called carfentanil on the streets. And carfentanil is absolutely terrifying. As I said, fentanyl is 50 to 100 times potent than morphine. Carfentanil is 10,000 times more potent.
Boggling.
If you're dealing with this stuff, it was never approved for human use.
So this is like the trank darts for elephant kind of stuff?
Yes, it was used in veterinary uses. And I heard on the radio somebody, or I'm not sure if it was on a radio or on a website, somebody who was dealing with carfentanil for veterinary uses, they have to wear a mask.
Wow.
They
just in case like a little touches them?
A little touches or inhales it, dead. It is a terrifying drug. So you imagine a grain of salt in your baggie of heroin will be
lethal.
Lethal, pretty much. It will increase the potency of that hugely, much bigger high, but much, much bigger risk. You only need the tiniest of amounts in order to cause an overdose and cause death.
Is this stuff easy to produce, or?
I'm not 100% sure on that, but you don't need a lot. Milligrams. Like 5.
So you can spread one batch.
If you made any of it. Yeah, so you don't need much in order to spike the potency of your heroin greatly. So, a gram would last you years.
Yeah.
So it's very terrifying stuff. Now I think we're going to talk about some policy things that we could do in order to help solve and alleviate this crisis.
Okay. What has there been? I haven't heard much talk about. I mean, the government's obviously heard about this and been responding. Has there been any actual government talk in specific policies?
Specifically, a lot of the focus right now is getting more naloxone on to paramedics and just available for everything.
So reactionary instead of trying to figure out how to cut distribution or anything like that.
Well, I'm sure the places are working.
Oh, I'm sure they're working. Don't get me wrong, but I'm saying in terms of specific policy, most of what's been going on has been, let's at least try to prevent people from dying from this that's already out there because it's out there.
A couple things I'm going to talk about here. When naloxone is a opioid antagonist. So what it does is it's basically the antidote to this stuff. If somebody's undergoing a overdose, undergoing respiratory depression, essentially that means your lungs are shutting down.
Yeah.
Naloxone will solve that. It will help with that. And it's being given more and more to paramedics and police officers, firefighters, and even being available to the common person, available if you are a drug user and are a drug addict.
Because there's no danger in giving someone that. It's literally just good for...
Yeah, it probably has side effects, but it doesn't give you a high. Nobody's gonna get addicted to naloxone. But so that's one of the things that people are doing. But it is, politically sometimes a little bit controversial. Safe injection sites.
Yeah. Those are the areas where you go and you have an area near help in case something goes down, as well as access to clean needles and other such things.
Yes. And those are important because it allows you, if you do have a little bit of fentanyl or carfentanil in the batch of drugs that you have, and you do undergo an overdose, you can right there with help. Other thing these types of safe injection sites do is they allow an entry point for help. A lot of the people that go there, they're addicts, but they don't want to be addicts.
They recognize the danger in what they're doing.
Exactly.
And so they're more along the lines of wanting to get help, at least in the very base sense of mitigating the dangers of their current activity. But I that easily can transition into wanting to actually end their addiction.
Yeah, exactly. So social workers and healthcare workers are there at the safe injection sites, and they can access help if they want it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them do, and you can get them into rehab, get them help.
Yeah.
It's a good entry point for an addict to get help. Mm-hmm. And that is another way in which these safe injection sites can start to alleviate this problem. Yeah. So those are the two things that the government in BC, Alberta, and just throughout Canada have been working on with that.
Well, most big cities will have safe injection sites no matter where you are.
Yeah, although, again, safe injection sites, because it is seen that you are condoning the practice of illicit drugs, have been politically controversial. And I believe under the Harper government, there's a lot of resistance to them. Depending on who's in charge, you'll get less of them.
Yeah, well, like anybody who wants to be hard on drugs, it just seems to be the antithesis, even though it can actually be very effective at stopping drug use. Because one of the things I think we talked about this last time is just outright illegalizing something isn't the best way to prevent it. It's to give alternatives. And like in terms of drug, if you start killing the demand, you'll start affecting supply.
Definitely, for sure. So I think that's about all we have to say about this particular topic. Would you like to move on to our national news?
I think it's about time to go a little bigger and head to national news. All right, so we're heading into national news with the conservative leadership race here, and well, it's looking a little eerily familiar to another conservative, shall we say, leadership race that happened recently. We've got our social conservatives, got our libertarians who don't really have, well, though this libertarian actually does have a shot, and then we have the guy who is on TV who wants to be
the reality TV star, but we'll get to him.
Yeah, we'll get to him at the end.
So the conservative leadership election we held May 27th. Now, something to note about the format of the election before we get into all the candidates, or at least there are 14
candidates.
14 people.
Oh boy.
There are a lot of people involved in this race, so we're gonna skip briefly over some of the minor players.
Well, there was more. There was 17, but three of them have dropped out at this point.
I'm not sure if some of those actually said that they would. I think they're just... But anyway, so there's 14 people. Now, what's important as far as the format of this is that it is riding by riding. So what that means is my hometown riding in Alberta, where there are a lot of conservatives, because it's rural Alberta, will have the same weight as, let's go even into Edmonton and say, like, the university area.
Yeah, which will have still some conservatives. Yeah. Because every riding will, but their votes will be much stronger.
Yeah, exactly. So those ridings are the equal strength. So it's like the national election in that it is which leader gets each riding.
Yes.
Not each vote. They're not counting votes, they're counting ridings.
But the votes aren't to everyone, it's only to the conservative.
Exactly.
Right?
So because of that, that'll mean that
there's a preference, or there's more power given to those small, or those ridings that are much more liberal or NDP focused.
Exactly. So Quebec and some urban ridings will have, the votes there will be much more important than rural Alberta.
Which may affect policy, because the values and the concerns of those different groups of people are, well, different.
Exactly. So let's jump right into it. Let's start with what some consider to be the front runner.
So we're looking here at Maxime Bernier. He's currently was born in Quebec. He's bilingual, so he's got that going for him, which you'd think in Canada every politician has to be bilingual, but apparently that's not the case. But he's an interesting case because I guess Canada being a bit more liberal, it makes sense that one of the front runners would be a libertarian.
Yeah, so libertarian policies, basically, socially, the government's not supposed to get involved in pretty much anything.
It's tiny government, but the idea, that the government doesn't even, it goes so far as to say the government shouldn't even tax things differently in the extreme cases. Yeah. And try to even influence change and just let the free market do what it will, let people do what they will so long as they don't harm another. Which, to some conservatives, is what they view as conservative, but especially here in Alberta, where you get a lot of social conservatives, That's actually fairly different than what they're used to. He doesn't mention it on his website, but he definitely would support the legalization of marijuana, which by and large for conservatives would be a touchy point.
For sure. Now, he was a long-time cabinet minister for Stephen Harper, industry, foreign affairs, small business, tourism. He's been a conservative MP for a long time. What gives him a little big leg up is his appeal in Quebec.
Yeah. He's born there, he's bilingual, as we said.
Yeah, which a lot of the conservative leadership candidates do not speak very good French. The French debate for the leadership happened recently, and I don't speak French, but those who do said it was a rather embarrassing display by most of the leadership candidates.
I should have listened to that, because I do understand French to a degree. I've lost a lot, but...
Yeah, a lot of the candidates do not speak very good French.
As good as I do.
Yeah, exactly. So because of his appeal in Quebec, he's gonna have a big leg up on a lot of his competitors. So yeah, libertarian, less taxes. I mean, every conservative tax kind of is going to be for less taxes.
Yeah.
But he will maybe even be for less taxes than a lot of them.
Yeah.
But again, social, unlike some of the fringer candidates that we'll talk about, social conservative issues are not going to be a focus of his campaign at all.
Yeah. So, next person I think we'll talk about is Andrew Scheer. Now, I'd love to talk a whole bunch about another frontrunner, but unfortunately this guy's rather bland. I mean...
Oh my.
I not a huge offense, but he's even got, like, the website we went to is completely bland. His facial expression is completely bland. I mean, he's what you think of if the Conservative Party was to amalgamate into, like, a human being, sort of, or possibly an android.
Yep.
Yeah. That would just be Andrew Scheer. He is just like, if you think of, this is what the Conservative Party stands for in Canada, that's what he stands for.
I mean, yeah, he's running for a more inclusive Conservative Party, whatever that means. He's from Saskatchewan, right?
No, he was born in Ottawa.
But he's the MP of Saskatchewan.
Yes, but he's coming from Saskatchewan, which is, where a bunch of conservatives are from.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
He is the support of a bunch of members of the Conservative Caucus. He has the most boring website out of anyone.
with pictures that aren't actually aligned properly, so pretty much all the pictures on his website with his bio are shots of his body, with his head cut off.
I think there's a possibility that if he, by some miracle, gets elected to be the leader of the Conservative Party, he may have less charisma than Stephen Harper.
Yeah. No, like, the only thing of note I would say about his campaign or him or anything is just that he's a Catholic guy doing this. Which, for conservatives, isn't surprising, but it's a little different.
I don't know. He's a guy. He's conservative. He's from Saskatchewan. He
studied politics and then got into politics. And
he was an insurance broker.
He worked as an insurance broker, which is the thing you tell everyone at a party when you want to impress them.
He was the speaker of the previous government experience. He was a speaker of the House of Commons. Yeah. That means he's basically the moderator of debates in the House of Commons.
It's good experience. It's very good experience.
He's now the leader of the opposition in the House of Commons. So that means he's sort of the leader in-house, not leader of the party, but the kind of in the actual legislature he leads.
Yeah. So his political experience is good.
Yeah.
Like, he is very, I would want to say, qualified or has good amount of experience, but...
I'm just reading something that is somewhat interesting.
Ooh, what's this?
He was banned from traveling to Russia under retaliatory sanctions.
That's interesting.
That's not, it wasn't personally, but just because the Harper government sanctioned Russia, Russia lashed out. Okay, so let's move on to something a little bit more interesting. Kelly Leitch.
Oh, Kelly Leitch.
I think I mentioned her last week.
Yeah, well, she became infamous. Was it this last year or was it 2 years ago?
I mean, a year and a half ago, I'd say.
Yeah, that was what it was.
Yeah, because that was when the election was. There was the barbaric Practices hotline.
Right, that was set up.
That was her big thing. During the last general election, the Conservative Party, and specifically, actually, Chris Alexander, which we'll mention a bit later, it set up a hotline where Canadians could report on barbaric cultural practices.
Now, in practice, like, you could argue this sounds good, but pretty much everyone saw it as a way of being like, oh, you think the Muslim guy's beating his wife, call this up.
Yeah, and so that in combination with the niqab ban for citizenship was a big issue in the last election. Now, Kelly Leitch has pivoted this into now asking for immigrants to be screened for Canadian values, whatever that means. When I listened to her on the radio talk about it, it was like generosity and like just vague.
Yeah.
Vague statements, and that she would accomplish this by having more face-to-face meetings between immigration officials and immigrants. Mm-hmm. And that would be paid for by the immigrants themselves, although she said that wouldn't be refugees, but I would hazard a guess that if Kelly Leitch did become Prime Minister, there'd be much less refugees coming into the country.
No, and you're having this screening process. I mean, once again, like the previous thing, it sounds like, oh, we don't want awful people in, and I mean, it's preying to the fears of terrorism and stuff that, although Canadians are far less susceptible to, still some of them apparently do have it.
Yeah, she was rather excited about the prospect of a Donald Trump presidency. She made a email supporting the election of Donald Trump in November. A bit about her experience. Mm-hmm. She was the Minister of Labor as well as the Minister of the Status of Women. Yes, that's about it for Kelly Leitch.
Yeah, other than the Donald Trump thing, which is interesting because given her support of him, that probably would speak to how a bunch of her other policies would end up panning out as she starts to develop a fuller list of policies, right?
Yeah, so mostly she's just running on an anti-immigration platform, to summarize.
Yeah.
Now, actually, another person I just mentioned, Chris Alexander, I find him a little bit of an interesting figure. He was actually in the news recently. If you remember the Lock Her Up chant.
The what?
Remember the Lock Rachel Notley Up chant?
Oh, Lock Her Up, yes.
Yes, so that chant happened during a anti-carbon tax rally in Calgary. The person who was at the front when that happened was Chris Alexander.
Was he? Did they actually have video of him screaming "Lock her up"?
No. He did not. Was not leading the chant.
Okay.
You can kind of see him possibly moving his hand in time.
Solidarity.
In time or solidarity. Later, he disowned the chant.
Oh, of course. 'Cause you can't. You would just not be able to be a politician.
Yeah.
Unless you're, from Brooks.
What are you referencing?
Oh, come on. Derek Hildebrand? He says all sorts of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Derek Hildebrand, if people who don't know, is basically the second in command of the opposition, fairly far-right Wild Rose Party.
Yeah, and probably a big source of stress for
Brian Jean.
The
leader of the
Wild Rose. Yeah.
So, a little bit of the background of Chris Alexander. He was a longtime ambassador.
To Afghanistan.
He was an ambassador before then, but one of his main roles for the longest time was the ambassador to Afghanistan. Widely lauded for that work there. Apparently did a wonderful job as the ambassador to Afghanistan. Then he became an MP, and because of his experience as an ambassador to Afghanistan, he was a fairly natural choice to be the minister in charge of citizenship and immigration. He was, again, involved in the announcement of the Barbaric Practices Hotline, although his platform is very pro-immigrant. If you listen to, I've read some of the stuff that he has said, and you get the feeling that if he had his say, that the Conservative platform last election would have been different.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He never has said it outright, but he definitely, and you see from his platform, much more pro-immigrant than even the last Harper regime.
And I mean, I'm sure a lot of that comes into play due to him being an ambassador, specifically to Afghanistan, where we had a few people come from there.
Yeah. Now, he's still, basically all of these people, except for Michael Chung.
Yeah.
Michael Chung.
Well, we'll get to a lot of those minor characters.
Also,
I mean, he's a minor character, admittedly.
Yeah, but I find him a little bit interesting. So, anti-carbon tax, like everyone, but pro-immigration, which is a little bit different than some of these other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Other ones, Lisa
Rate, it would probably
Rate,
be.
okay. Fairly boilerplate conservative. Again, she was Minister of Labor, Minister of Transport for a while. And she. Ooh, ma'am.
Hey, don't assume.
Okay. She is most notable for launching a website that against Kelly Leach and Kevin O'Leary.
Yeah.
She launched a whole press conference, and the only purpose of this press conference was to attack two other candidates in the race, one of which was not even in the race and had very recently.
But as we joked last week, and the funny thing is, we released last week's episode, and that very day, he put his hat into the ring. We're talking about Kevin O'Leary here.
Yeah.
But no, attacking those two candidates, everybody knew for probably about a month or two, that Kevin O'Leary was jumping in. He was just being coy. Since
Donald Trump got elected president.
Yeah.
But really, that seems to be a move like no one's talking about Lisa Rate.
Yeah. She's not at all in the running for it, but she did do something, I guess, somewhat notable. Yeah. The other thing too about I guess we'll get to him in a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll hold my tongue.
Why don't we get to that? I mean, I think I've all I have to say. No, let's go for some of the also-rans. So yeah, we got
Michael Chung.
Yeah, so he's notable for being the only one, as far as I can tell, that is pro-carbon tax. Mm-hmm. That's for taking climate change a little bit more seriously.
And one of the few not white ones. Not white guy ones.
I don't know. He looks pretty white.
Yeah, fair enough.
So that's a bit of note. You have a couple people, Brad Trost, and who was the other guy? Andrew Saxon? No.
No, it wasn't Andrew Saxon. It was, Pierre Lemieux.
Brad Trost and Pierre Lemieux have a couple people running on a little bit more of a social conservative platform.
Yeah.
And then you have a couple other also-rans,
Deepak
O'Brien and,
I mean, he's Calgarian, so he's got a little bit, but once again, you have to have influence in Quebec to get the conservative leadership in Canada.
There's just Rick Peterson.
Yeah.
He is running on a financial platform.
But, I mean, these are people we're talking about to have, 2, maybe 4 prominent Canadians supporting them. They're now granted, we had analogs to that in the Republican leadership race.
Yeah.
Who, although, because America's bigger and because they seem to have far longer and huger campaigns and actually you knew their name, but by and large, for the most part, we're looking at the Ben Carson or even less than that level.
The Rick Santorums.
Yes, the Rick Santorums.
There's just a lot of people. Most of them have no shot. We're going to talk about somebody who might have a shot. Kevin O'Leary.
So, I don't think, given who our audience probably is, he needs no introduction. But
let's give him
a little introduction, because interesting fact on how we made his money.
Yeah. So, if anybody played edutainment of the
video game variety.
Yeah, of the late 90s, early 2000s, I want to say.
Well, which was its heyday, admittedly.
Yeah, so
for sure.
He was heavily involved in the leadership of the Learning Company. Mm-hmm. Making Gizmos and Gadgets, all the Super Solvers games, Gizmos, Gadgets,
the Math
Blasters, all of those.
Reading Blaster.
All of those. And he engineered a merger between the Learning Company and Mattel. Now, that merger almost bankrupted Mattel. But he made out like a bandit and made millions and millions of dollars. Later, he parlayed that into a role on the CBC television show Dragon's Den, where many of you will know him, and later into the US television show Shark Tank.
Yeah.
And then into commenting about politics on CBC, on the Lang and O'Leary exchange, and then just a guy who has opinion about things.
So Don Cherry.
Yes. Somewhat of an analog. Most recently, he promised to invest $1 million in the oil field of Rachel Notley's
that was a lovely, and her response to that was Yeah, no, I'm not going to be held hostage by you. Sorry, bud.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a background on how he made his money. And
then gradually got into politics, and
yeah,
now we see him here.
Yeah, so see, he recently got into the race.
Narrowly missing.
Yes.
No, granted, he's from Montreal, but if many of you probably know, Montreal or Montreal has quite a few, like, Anglophone, solely Anglophone speakers, solely English speakers, and he is one of them for sure. He can't speak French to save his life, and there's been a lot of hypothesizing or conspiracy theorizing that he intentionally missed the French language debate because he just can't speak it.
Yeah.
Period, pretty much.
But, to quote him, not important, because he speaks the language of jobs. Yes, that is
that rhetoric.
That is hilarious. Anyway.
No, yeah. So, like, this is where, because we go back to Quebec, because it really, with the conservative leadership race, it always comes back to Quebec. Mm-hmm. So he is from Quebec, which, although Irish background and not, like, arguably Quebecois, that might actually play into it because there is that bit of a almost nationalism. But he can't speak French.
I don't think it's gonna help.
I don't think either.
Yeah, so he's running on a very much a similar idea of a campaign to Donald Trump. He's not going to give a lot of anti-immigration rhetoric that might end up being part of his platform once he discovers a platform. Mm-hmm. But as far as rhetoric, we really just have rhetoric.
Well, I said Irish. He's Irish and Lebanese, I believe. But he's touted that as one of the reasons why he's not going to go against any singular people group, kind of like, you know, Donald Trump talked about the Muslims and stuff, Lebanese. I'm pretty sure there's that background somewhere there. No, he's not going at all against that. He's mentioned that it's solely going to be the economic stuff he's focusing on. Yeah.
So it's an economic populist message.
Yeah.
Similar to Donald Trump, it's going to be, the elites and Justin Trudeau are taking money from the working class farmers and oil rig workers and coal miners, and I am going to bring jobs back. Jobs. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be it's just launching, but it's going to be a very similar campaign to the one that Donald Trump did in the States, but without the anti-immigration stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, he's not going to even go on the social conservative stuff. His focus will be entirely economics and in anti-elites, populist campaign, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's about all we have to say. Anything else?
Yeah, I think we should talk about some of the people, because there have been some notable people that have talked about him. We had Maxime, one of the guys we talked earlier on, came out against his not being able to speak French. Maxime being the Quebecois, who is running. And, I mean, there's others who are trying to learn, but he specifically singled him out. The one that really came around was Arlene Dickinson, who is another one of the Dragons. And she blasted him.
Yes,
she went on basically on a news program and called him a selfish prick, essentially.
Yeah.
Not in those terms, but essentially said he's selfish and he's not really a great guy. You know, he's opportunistic, which the whole Mattel thing arguably could be proof of that.
Yeah, he engineered the...
he cost another company a lot of money, but made off well.
He made off with hundreds of millions of dollars.
So, I mean, she's as... Now, granted, if you watch the show at all, you know that they don't really get along. But, no, she definitely was not mincing any words and is coming out against him as soon as, as soon as he announced his official joining.
Yeah, he's been flirting for a while. In a year ago, he gave a presentation saying, if I run, this is how. This guy has been flirting with it with a while. We'll have to see kind of how this race kind of pans out. Because as of now, there's not a firm front runner.
No, but there's too many of the minor characters that would take, as soon as they start to drop off.
Yeah,
we'll be able to. I'm sure it'll probably come down to Bernier, Andrew Scheer, and unfortunately Kevin O'Leary. It just seems like the way it's going to go.
Yeah, I think possibly Kelly Leach could stay in.
You think she might? Do you think she'd stay in as kind of like a protest, like I'm just going to push this through,
or from an anti-immigration perspective?
Oh, you think she might be able to get enough votes to actually be viable?
For example, Kevin O'Leary have stated that he opposes the immigration policies of Kelly Leach.
True.
So even though they are, one may link them in terms of Trump-like in certain ways. They are definitely opposed on some issues.
Yeah.
So I think that's about all we have to say at that. Let's move on to our global news. All right, so Donald Trump. He's now president of the United States, if you didn't know.
45th, they say.
45th, I believe, if I'm right.
We'll have the 46th in how many months?
Who knows? Some of this stuff that has come out might end up eventually becoming impeachable.
Yeah. So, like, there's no way we weren't talking about him. We avoided it last week, but it's his inauguration. There's a bunch of stuff that he's said immediately after becoming president, and all the talks about, even around the inauguration, there's been a bunch of stuff with regards to his alternative facts, shall we say, about it?
Yeah, and then you have the allegations from the document procured by BuzzFeed.
Yeah, there's that thing came out. That was a little bit before the inauguration.
That was before the inauguration. Yes, the allegations around Russian
prostitutes and
Russian
water sports.
Yeah, there was that, but more generally, Russian influence of Donald Trump.
Oh yeah,
and the fact that the allegation that Russia may have been kind of procuring influence in Donald Trump for a long time.
Well, and there was the idea that Russia actually influenced the election, which I don't know to what extent that is actually possible, but
well, I mean, there was the WikiLeaks stuff.
Yeah, that's
which did have some influence in the election. Just week after week of bad news for Hillary Clinton from WikiLeaks. They drip-feeded it, so they kept on having the stream of bad news for Hillary Clinton. And it was never super, super bad. But always just this little thing. It's just like, somebody in the Clinton campaign had talked about possibly influencing the Catholic Church, and that'll turn off a certain segment of voters.
Yeah.
Somebody possibly had leaked a primary debate stuff to Hillary Clinton. That was one of the big things. Now, these are not necessarily things that are going to switch votes between...
No. And I don't think any of them made the huge news. Like, they were talked about a bit, but none of them were really overly... especially those two that not overly talked about.
Yes, but they are things that will dampen enthusiasm.
Well, and you get that general perception that you're able to create, that she always has these things coming out about her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, the intelligence community had said that both the Republican and the Democrat National Convention were hacked, but only the Democratic ones were leaked. And also, there a high degree, and certainly on the intelligence community, that the hacking was done by Russia.
Yeah.
So, we just jumped right into it, didn't we? We just kind of went right into the nitty gritty of Russian hacking and such. So
it's an important thing that was still being talked about this past week.
Yeah, definitely. Well, with the recent talked about a bit earlier, but the document received from BuzzFeed, it was a several-page intelligence document that had been making the rounds through the intelligence community, through journalists. Most people had seen this document. When it came out into the public eye, it was not a surprise to the people that were in the know.
Yeah.
Everyone knew this document existed. It was done by a British former spy who has a very high degree of credibility in the intelligence community. Now, the facts in this document, the Russian prostitutes, around the allegations that Russia had collected blackmail material on Donald Trump and had been getting influence on Donald Trump for a long time.
Yeah.
Those allegations may not be true. BuzzFeed himself said that they were unverifiable.
No. Just to jump off here, BuzzFeed, I'm sure a lot of you might be just thinking about all those annoying quizzes on Facebook. No, for sure. But in actuality, the journalism side of BuzzFeed is gathering quite a good deal of renown and respect. One could argue surprisingly. But that's where it stands. So calling, even though we're mentioning BuzzFeed, and your mind may wander to, oh, BuzzFeed. No, it's actually legitimate to be calling BuzzFeed journalistic in this sense.
And after BuzzFeed released the document, CNN, while not reporting on the exact details of the document, followed up on that.
Yeah. So there's one of your more mainstream news services.
Actually, right after that, when CNN went to a press conference of Trump was talking about his way of preventing conflict of interest.
Oh, boy.
Most ethics professionals say that the best thing for him to do, because he has such a large business empire, and things he does as president will, of course, affect his business empire. Mm-hmm. So the best thing for him to do was to sell all of his assets into a blind trust, where he has to have no control of it.
So this is a third party that you don't even know, you have no real line of communication with, and so anything that you do or you're planning to do is unknown to the person running your business, and anything the business is planning on to do is unknown to you.
Yes.
So that you can still, at the end of it, maintain your business. You're not having to just like liquidate all your assets and everything.
Yeah.
But it allows you that level of not security, but it allows you that level of being beyond reproach.
Exactly.
With that, yeah.
I mean, business leaders and people that have had assets such as that have run for office before. This is not a new thing. Mm-hmm. Paul Martin was hit for some ethics conflict of interest allegations. It's very, very common.
Yeah, well, and especially with people with big business empires and ones that kind of cross into the political realm through either international business deals, which is very common, and other things. It's hard to argue that even if you put it in a blind trust, you can still kind of know what your business is kind of involved in.
That's what the blind trust is meant to minimize.
Yeah.
But his plan, of course, is just to make his kids run it.
Yeah, who, unless he's an absolute horrible dad, he will probably be talking to at some point.
Well, and his daughter was in with a meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan.
Yeah.
His son-in-law is a top advisor in his White House staff.
Yeah.
For example, just recently, Jared Kushner is his son-in-law's name, went to Calgary to talk to Justin Trudeau and his cabinet ministers about the possible negotiation of NAFTA. So, all these people are going to be involved in Trump's life and going to be advising him. And
so having them involved in his business, it's one level of disassociation is not enough.
Yes, he's already being sued for conflict of interest.
No.
A group has sued him under I think it's called the Annulments Clause of the Constitution, which says that a president of the United States may not receive gifts from foreign governments.
Mm-hmm.
And one could argue, and that's what their argument, I think it's a pretty good argument, that if he is still financially benefiting from the interests of the Trump Corporation, any deals foreign governments or foreign businesses make with the Trump corporation could be seen as a bribe, or could be worked into a bribe.
Yeah.
Say you're India, and you are concerned about the trade protectionism, but maybe you whisper to some business, if maybe we could just fast track this hotel.
Yeah.
Fast track this golf course somewhere.
And then all of a sudden you're...
And all of a sudden, there's no trade penalty for India. Mm-hmm. Very easy stuff. This is why people want to go into blind trust. And that's why he's being sued already. Days into his presidency. He's being sued for conflict of interest. Let's talk a little bit about the inauguration.
So this is one of the funniest things I heard at the inauguration is him touting that he had more people at his than Obama.
Yeah.
And no, it's objectively false. I mean, unless you're what you're defining as a person, and then you're counting some people as 3/5. But no, you're not gonna get that number. But the other thing that's hilarious is just in Washington they have the Women's March happening alongside.
Yeah.
Which actually had more than his inauguration as well.
It was a huge turnout the day after for the Women's March. They hit all 7 continents.
Yeah. No, they did. And I don't know if you saw the video with Peter Mansbridge. kind of doing a report there. He's off on a tiny little like avenue that's like a bottleneck, and people are just kind of marching in that area. It's not the main march, and it looks enormous. You can see the Washington Monument in the background, and you can see where all the people would be like in the mall, be just milling about. And no, this little tiny avenue.
No, they filled the streets of Washington. They filled the streets of many major cities in the States. Marches all throughout the world. In LA, I think there was 750,000 people in LA.
Well, I mean, outside our ledge, there was people.
About 3,000 in Edmonton.
Yeah. Which, given that it's Canada in the middle of winter, in conservative heartland, that's pretty darn good.
It's Edmonton, though. Edmonton's not the conservative
heartland. No, true. Not Edmonton, but Alberta.
Yeah.
But no, you have all that going on. And by and large, from what I heard, these protests also were organized and affected very well. There wasn't any of the usual violence and stuff that people can argue happens. I mean, with most large protests, you're always going to run into people who are just going to start stuff because they can and they want to and they need an excuse.
Yeah.
But at these, like even the Washington one, they had a little bit of a trouble because some people brought a Trump vehicle into the march area, and that caused a little bit of tension. But there wasn't actually any outbreaks of rioting or anything like that.
No, there were very few arrests. It was a very non-violent protest.
Which is given the size, that's
which is to its credit.
Yeah.
But Sean Spicer, just going back to the inauguration, Sean Spicer, in a press conference a few days after the inauguration, said, "This is the largest audience to ever see an inauguration, both in person and throughout the world, period," which is demonstrably false. You can see side-by-side photos of Obama's inauguration and the Trump inauguration.
Yeah.
And it is hugely different. Sean Spicer, again, the Trump's press secretary.
Yeah, so speaking for Trump.
Slammed the media for doctoring photos, for showing things that the different angles, where it's clear. You see the same angle. It's the same exact shot.
No. And I mean, the sad thing is that people who are only listening to Trump's press secretary and certain other ways of getting their information are going to hear this and be like, look at these lies. People are trying to denounce it. And no, it's objectively false.
It is quite concerning that the Trump administration is just going to flat out lie. And they're going to flat out lie.
From the get-go.
Flat out lie over and over about things little, things big, things that we know are false, things that we can't know are false. When we talk about when we get to them talking about drone strikes, talking about foreign troop stuff, like these are things that are much harder to verify than the size of a crowd in Washington.
Yeah.
And they're going to lie about them, which is quite concerning.
And I mean, I'll be honest, I was hoping that when Trump finally got in, that some of this would actually change and he would switch from a campaign mode to being, the boss and being in charge mode. But no, it seems like it's the same.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yep. And then later, Kellyanne Conway, I'm just going to mention this because we referenced it earlier. Kellyanne Conway went on the U.S. political news talk show circuit, went on all the CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all the big ones, news networks, and talked about this. Her line was that Sean Spicer provided alternative facts, which is one of the most BSy terms I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing that you are able to spin the word lie. Like, you've got some cojones if you want to try to spin what lies are.
Yeah. She definitely got called out by pretty much everyone.
Oh yeah, but
alternative facts, which is just hilarious. I don't know what else. Do you have anything else that you want to?
No, I mean, a lot of this we'll have to see. We know from when he's gotten in some of the things he's acted on. It's kind of, we've mentioned NAFTA. There was the NAFTA renegotiation he's looking at doing, which isn't surprising. The TPP, which arguably might be actually a good thing that they're backing out of that, because I've never really been in favor of that. But no, a lot, and the pipelines, and arguably he might even get Dakota access up, which
that will
be a news story if it does happen, for sure.
That would be very interesting if they just after the Dakota access pipeline got shut down at Standing Rock, they were going to look into rerouting it around the native land.
Yeah.
If he pushes that through, And then that protest, which was a huge story for such a long time, gets re-upped again. That would be very interesting.
And now that people have time to mull it over, wouldn't be surprised if that protest would grow hugely in numbers. I mean, especially when videos of what happened to the protesters and stuff came out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. In news that a lot of people around here are going to be very excited about, the Keystone XL pipeline will get approved, which may be quite beneficial for Alberta. That's a positive.
Yeah, no, it is a positive. And I mean, I'm, resident liberal environmentalist hippie, but when it really comes down to is if you look at the numbers of oil spills and stuff, pipelines, it's kind of you're dealing with, they do burst and they let out a lot of oil on occasion, but it's more of a lot of oil in one spot, whereas trucks and stuff, you kind of get spills happening all the time, but they're much fewer because of how much a truck or a train car can hold, kind of spread out. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe that in general the pipelines are actually safer when it comes to reducing spills. It just so happens that anywhere where the pipeline is, if it does leak, it's just going to be an ecological disaster.
That's why you have to be careful about where you build them. That's why the standing right protest. Interestingly, just read a story on CBC that one of the guys involved in TransCanada, who's the people behind some of the pipelines and the Keystone XL, he thought that Canada could have gotten the Keystone XL approved by the Obama administration if the Harper government would put in a carbon tax. So that's just a little aside.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, going back to carbon taxes, there's a lot of doing one of those things where people who are like thinking they're conservative will hate it, but it's a way of like bridging the gap and stuff. Yeah, that's way very common. I mean, our current carbon tax is arguably doing that same thing.
That is, in fact, Justin Trudeau mentioned Alberta's carbon tax as a reason why he approved the TransCanada power plant. So there's that. I think that's about all we have to talk about. I think you had some paleontology things to talk about in news that doesn't really matter.
News that doesn't really matter, coming right up. All right, so going into news that doesn't matter, I wanted to talk about some paleo stuff. As the name suggests, I am the Dino Man. I did study paleontology in university, but there's been actually some pretty interesting discoveries in 2016.
Okay.
And arguably the most exciting, especially to me.
We're going to lead with the most exciting one?
Oh, I'm going to lead with the most exciting. It's super exciting.
Okay.
Feathers and amber.
Okay.
So basically, they found dinosaur tail with multiple preserved feathers in amber. And for those of you who don't know, dinosaurs having feathers is something that was come up like 90s or earlier. They were talking about having dinosaurs having feathers being a reality. The only reason Jurassic Park didn't show it, even though at the time the movie was made, was just because the public perception of dinosaurs wasn't ready for that yet. But
so what percentage of dinosaur species had feathers? Like, just a rough... name a few. Velociraptors had feathers.
Okay, so all your dromaeosaurs almost definitely did.
What's
dromaeosaurs are your raptors.
Okay.
So raptors all definitely did, and they were probably covered like head to toe.
Okay, just all feathers.
Yeah. Tyrannosaurus had feathers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they very likely had feathers. It's when you start going away from those tiny type of dinosaurs that the feathers become less and less obvious.
Okay.
And especially when you go into the whole, like, your duck-billed dinosaurs and stuff like that, they pretty much didn't have feathers.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of dinosaurs we're now finding probably had feathers. Now, granted, these don't think about like big flying feathers and whatnot, like the preserved Archaeopteryx. If you've never seen it, look it up. It's a half bird, half dinosaur, they call it. But it's this from Mongolia, this specimen that has feather imprints.
Okay.
And it has very much like flight feathers on it. But no, a lot of the feathers they would have had the more like downy, and I mean, you can see in the pictures of these ones in amber, they look mostly like just hairs with things coming off of them. They're very primitive. So they're not quite like the feathers you would think of, but they are still legit feathers. And I mean, feathers we think still came from scales, kind of from that development process. But
so, why did dinosaurs have feathers? What is the evolutionary purpose of the dinosaur feathers? Does anybody know?
Oh, well, nobody knows, right? You can't really know things, but the thought would be...
Hey, Christian, can we know anything?
Can we know anything? Yes. No, it's not for flight. Okay, the dinosaurs did not evolve feathers to fly. That's just kind of thought to be a happy accident that eventually came of it. But no, it would be partially for sexual selection, like color and such.
Okay.
It could possibly be for some sort of heat regulation.
All right.
Like animals with fur make themselves look bigger to look scarier. They could be used in that context as well.
So multi-use.
So yeah, they would be multi-use. They would not be for flight, though.
All right.
So that's kind of one of the neat ones. Amber, that's the thing, Jurassic Park, that they found the DNA in. So finding feathers in that means they're almost perfectly preserved, which is really cool. We get to see it. I believe, like, the pigmentation is even somewhat preserved. So it's flabbergasting to see that.
That's exciting.
Yeah, another thing that they found really well preserved was actually and this is reported near the end of the year, but they found a octopus from the Jurassic. Now, you might think octopus, whatever, but anything without a real good solid skeleton, like, are very hard to find preserved. Like, their insects are hardly ever preserved. It's very hard to find them because they just disappear so easily. And so not only is this octopus really well preserved, it's almost completely articulated. Like, all the pieces are all together. And yeah, no, it's an amazing find. There's hardly any. The only cephalopods, like the squid-like things that we find, are usually the things with the shells, the ammonites and stuff, and we just find the shell of it.
Okay.
So finding this one with all, like, the tentacles and whatnot is just... It's a crazy find.
Do we know what is different about a Jurassic octopod and a now octopod?
I think they're still looking at it, although, as I understand, it hasn't changed a whole lot.
Okay, so it's like sharks and crocodiles.
It's one of those legacy, I don't think that's the right term, but it's
living fossils.
No, it's not a living fossil per se, because a living fossil is the same, like, genus or species. But it is a type of animal that has had very little change.
Okay.
But, no, it's an amazing find. It's an amazing find indeed. Another one that is really awesome is looking at dinosaur eggs. So some of them have the embryos preserved in them.
Yep.
And so one thing they found out is just like tree rings, you kind of have growth rings for bone.
Okay.
And so looking at these, and I think it was in particular the teeth, they were actually able to determine how long dinosaurs had.
Oh.
And they had probably close to double the incubation time they thought. They had incubation times much closer to reptiles, which are long incubation times, than birds. And
so birds are generally about a month or so?
I mean, it depends on the bird.
Okay.
But yeah, birds have shorter incubation times.
Okay.
And so looking at these, especially for the larger dinosaurs, they might have had some pretty massive incubation times.
So think like 9 months, think like years,
No, not years, but on the scale of multiple months for sure.
Okay.
So when you're looking at these, that actually would tie very much into ideas of why the dinosaurs actually went extinct.
Okay.
Because there's multiple things that probably went wrong at the same time, and this probably factored into it as well. Mm-hmm. Because as, like, you know, things get colder and they're already they're already being outcompeted by mammals and birds in certain areas, then all of a sudden you're having to deal with having much longer incubation times. That makes your offspring a bit less, like, competitive compared to the others. So that was a very, very interesting find. I mean, it's something that possibly we could have found out earlier than this, but, I mean, just thin sectioning teeth and stuff isn't something we always do, especially for embryos and shells. They're not crazy common, right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
So, no, there's that. I think there's only a few more stories I wanted to kind of go over. It's been a really good year. I
think you had something about Tyrannosauruses. Let's go with Tyrannosauruses.
Yes. So, in footprints found, they found that Tyrannosaurus is very likely actually, not very likely, but likely actually hunted in packs.
Okay.
So, they found footprints of Tyrannosaurus as well as a herbivorous dinosaur. And one of the big things is these things basically just made a sharp turn, and they all kind of sharp turned at the same point.
Okay.
And there wasn't really evidence of, like, them running around something. They were all going a decent clip. So the idea being that they were all actively hunting something kind of together and trying to analyze also how their pack dynamics worked with how the footprints are is what they're currently trying to do.
Okay.
But preliminary research thinks that they might have actually had a bit more, less of the lone wolfy idea that we had, and they might have been a bit more gregarious.
Okay. So a bit more like what we think of raptors.
Yeah, like the way, we don't know exactly, right? Everything's still kind of pending with that, but yeah, the way you think of raptors being portrayed with them hunting in a pack,
I mean,
that might
Chris
be
Pratt was the leader of the raptors, and that is very scientifically accurate.
That's incredibly scientific. The raptor whisperer there, yeah.
Yeah, it's like that.
It's exactly like that.
Okay.
Pretty much a human could become a T-Rex alpha. Is
really?
What we're saying.
Is this what the Jurassic World sequel is going to turn into?
Yeah. Chris Pratt is now that giant dinosaur. The amalgamation is going to form a pack, and then going to be led by Chris Pratt, and he's going to make a saddle and ride it or something.
Okay, and then they're going to have it fight the even bigger dinosaur that they make out of other dinosaurs?
No, they're going to make one a mecha dinosaur, I think.
Mecha dinosaur? I'm on board for mecha dinosaur. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, another story, which I didn't actually know about until recently, kind of looking for more stuff to kind of talk about and double checking the year, is they found eggs in a trilobite. Now, you know what a trilobite is, right? It's an arthropod, an aquatic arthropod.
So it's a old water bug. It looks like a cockroach.
Yes. So these things are...
Who cares about them?
People, like people who couldn't get in to study dinosaurs, people.
Oh, okay. Those people.
No, it's named after 3 lobes because it kind of has 3 lobes to it. But yeah, no, it is a cockroach of the water. It looks very much like it, and people have joked about it being such. But they found eggs in it, which actually appeared behind its big head. So that's where they think the eggs possibly were laid from.
Really, though, that actually is interesting. I gotta be honest, when you told me this story on the rundown before the show, I was not interested. But the head eggs, like, I'm looking at a picture of the thing right now.
And you see the head eggs.
Okay.
You see head eggs. So it's very well preserved.
So it doesn't lay eggs from its butt. It lays eggs by its neck. That's terrifying.
Yeah, that's the way we think currently, because it's a really well preserved specimen. So you kind of guess that most things are in situ.
Okay.
But yeah, no, they found eggs in these things, and that's kind of cool because finding out how certain animals, especially ones that are not very much like modern ones, reproduce is always super cool.
All right.
I mean, another one that when I did paleobotany studies, we often, like, all the studies were about seedlings and what did the growing plants look like and all that sort of thing. That was
back in your exciting paleobotany days, where you looked at ferns and only ferns.
It was not only ferns, but
it was only ferns.
And so, yeah, the final story I just want to talk is they found another long neck, a huge one from 90 million years ago in Australia.
Oh, good old Australia.
And one of the reasons I want to talk about this just because it has the name Savannahsaurus, and I think that's awesome. It's a really good name. I can't believe it hasn't been taken already, to be honest.
It's true. Savannah is one of my favorite Lion K songs.
Yeah, see, now you can think of a dinosaur every time you hear it.
Anyway, that's...
Hey, we don't want to get copyright strike on this.
We might already.
But yeah, no, they found one, and it's a very, like, complete skeleton from Australia.
Oh,
so
nice.
That's always good to hear. Like, well, a lot of people don't realize when we're talking dinosaurs, when you find a complete skeleton, if 60% of it's there, that's like crazy complete.
Yeah.
So
you're not just going off a leg bone and being like, is this the same as the other guy, or is it the young, or like the bigger one? Or...
Teeth. A lot of dinosaurs have been named exclusively from their teeth, which is actually a fairly accurate way of identifying stuff because teeth are very unique. Okay. But yeah, when it comes to a lot of, there's been sauropods, like long neck dinosaurs named after just mere leg bones, and then they've had to try to extrapolate how big these suckers were. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's kind of paleontology in a nutshell, or
all right,
an eggshell.
Because they laid eggs, right?
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's kind of been where things are. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, a lot of it is interesting, but hey, if somebody's probably going to get money from making some Discovery show with a bunch of CG about it, so it might matter to somebody.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. More interesting than I thought when you pitched this thing.
I know.
So I think that's all we have for today. I'm Bandburger.
I'm the Dino Man, so Next week, we'll talk about more local news,
World news.
national news, and news that doesn't matter.
Good night and good luck. And good day. Keeping that in. We're keeping that in.
We're keeping it in. Fuck it, we'll do it live.